Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Before I introduce the President of the American Bar Association, I want to briefly offer some special thanks. To make this program possible, we were very pleased to have the generous support of our primary sponsor, my law firm, Butler Snow. Additional support has been provided by the Robert R. McCormick Foundation and a number of individual sponsors. We'd like to give these donors thank these donors for their vital support of the Silver Gavel Awards. I am now pleased to welcome ABA President Linda Klein. Linda is the senior managing shareholder at Baker Donaldson, Bierman, Caldwell, and Berkowitz, based in the firm's Atlanta office. A longtime bar leader, Linda was the first woman to serve as president of the State Bar of Georgia. She has served as chair of the ABA House of Delegates and of the association's Tort, Trial, and Insurance Practice section. Among her many honors, she has been the recipient of the Margaret Brent Women's Lawyers of Achievement Award, which is the highest award of the ABA given to a woman. I am now honored to introduce the President of the American Bar Association and my long-term friend, Linda Klein.
Thank you, Steve. The Silver Gavel Awards are one of the American Bar Association's most beloved and significant annual traditions. They recognize outstanding efforts in media and the arts to foster the American public's understanding of the law. And this year we are marking a truly special commemoration. 2017 is the 60th annual presentation by the American Bar Association of these prestigious awards. Silver Gavel Awards have such a rich and illustrious history. I'd like to go through a few of the winners of the past, and you'll see what I mean. From 1958, Sidney Lumet's classic jury room drama, 12 Angry Men, produced by United Artists, of course starring Henry Fonda as juror number 8. From 1965, Fred Friendly's CBS Reports documentary, Gideon's Trumpet, written by Anthony Lewis. 1979, Wilbert Rideau's Conversations with the Dead in the Angelite, the Louisiana State Penitentiary's Prison Run magazine. Fred Friendly's 1983 PBS series, The Constitution, The Delicate Balance. Presented in 1966, Jonathan Harr's A Civil Action, the classic work of novelistic nonfiction about a complex environmental liability lawsuit and its aftermath. The StoryCorps founder Dave Isay's Witness to an Execution, the 2000 radio documentary. And finally, last year's winner, in the memorable documentary category, Making a Murderer. These are just a few examples of the many outstanding award winners in the past 60 years of presentations. To learn more about them, I encourage you to look at the impressive timeline of the prior Silver Gavel winners, and that begins on page 14 of your program booklet. This year, we're awarding 4 Silver Gavels and 2 honorable mention citations in the categories of books, documentaries, newspapers, radio, and television. The chair of the ABA Standing Committee on Gavel Awards, my friend Steve Eds, will introduce each of the award winners and highlight the outstanding contributions they've made to foster American public's understanding of the law and justice. Steve.
Thank you, Linda. So I'll begin with the 2 honorable mention citations. The 2017 Gavel honorable mention for books goes to Blood in the Water, The Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and Its Legacy, Pantheon Books. Read Heather Ann Thompson's brilliant, meticulously researched book, Blood in the Water, The Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and Its Legacy. You will learn about the primary black men who were then prisoners in Attica and the primarily white men who were their guards. You will learn about the extensive cover-up that took place for decades thereafter. Read Blood in the Water to learn about the hostages and the families and the police and the lawyers and the politicians. The book might leave you with more questions than answers. Riots or uprisings, punishments or torture, criminal or poor. Then ask yourself this: why do we allow poor black boys and girls to live beneath smokestacks and attend unfunded schools and communities without grocery stores and jobs, but with ready access to guns and to drugs, and yet shake our heads when so many of them are sent to prison? Yes, Attica ushered in some prison reforms, but it also heralded in a new era of mass incarceration. What has changed since Attica, nearly half a century ago? What will change in the next 50 years? These are the questions that Blood in the Water challenges us all to answer. Accepting the Honorable Mention Award is Heather Ann Thompson, author. Heather is unable to join us in person, but is able to join us by phone. So Howard, how does that occur? Okay. Okay. What? Okay, Heather?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you. And we know how much you wanted to be here, but we do know that your son had an accident and that prevents you from being here. But
He did, and I'm so sorry. It's such an honor, and I so very much wish I was there this evening.
Well, please give us some comments. We loved your book, and your book said so much to all of us.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to say that this recognition by the ABA is particularly meaningful to me because so much of the powerful story of the Attica prison uprising is really the story of incredible legal activism in the face of almost unimaginable hurdles and against all odds. This book tells of a legal defense effort that, in my view, was one of the most extraordinary in the entire 20th century. I think it's really up there with the legal defense efforts mobilized on behalf of Scottsboro boys, for example, and the fact that the ABA has recognized this book means that, to me, it recognizes the struggles of these people inside and the incredible fight of so many young lawyers, law students, the 201, they've all been honored tonight. So thank you so much to all of you, and again, my deep apologies. I can't be there this evening with you all.
Well, Heather, thank you so much. And if you haven't, please read the book. The 2017 Gavel Award honorable mention for newspapers goes to Forsaken, Florida's Broken Mental Health System, the Sun Sentinel, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Sun Sentinel's investigative series Forsaken examines Florida's broken mental health system. It starts with a basic fact. Florida is dead last of all 50 states, and being from Mississippi, that says something. In per capita public spending on public health services. The series examines the nexus between the state's mental health and criminal justice systems, delivering a powerful emotional impact. Forsaken provides tragic examples of inadequately trained police responders reacting with deadly force to mentally ill individuals who appear threatening to them. Forsaken also examines the impact of Florida's Baker Act, which provides for involuntary hospitalization of the mentally ill, exposing its weaknesses and limitations. The series sets out a number of solutions for how to fix Florida's failing mental health system. No one can read Forsaken and not come away highly informed about the devastating impact of underinvestment in mental health services in Florida and the tragic failures of the justice system that have accompanied it. The Sun Sentinel team regrets that they are unable to attend in person, so we accept the Honorable Mention Award on their behalf and ask you to join in congratulating them. And I urge you to read about this outstanding work in the program booklet that you have, and to also visit the ABA website at www.ambar.org/Gavel Awards for links and more information. And now for the big time, for the presentation of the Silver Gavel Awards. The 2017 Silver Gavel Award for books goes to Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City, the Crown Publishing Group. Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City is path-breaking ethnography exploring the processes of eviction, legal and otherwise. Author Matthew Desmond tells the story of 8 poor Milwaukee families as they struggled to maintain their homes. Evicted is unflinching and compassionate, heartbreaking, as well as hopeful. By focusing on rental housing and eviction, the author seeks to change the paradigm about how we think about poverty in America. Grounded in absolute solid research and ethnographic methods, what makes Evicted so compelling is the author's skillful use of narrative. Desmond captures in vivid detail the everyday struggles that his subjects face. Evicted dissects the laws, policies, and political and social constructs that produce and exacerbate profound housing inequality and discrimination. Desmond offers practical solutions to begin addressing America's housing crisis for our most impoverished citizens. These include publicly funded legal services for low-income defendants in housing court. His book is an absolute must-read for those who wish to deepen their understanding of how eviction results in poverty as well as profit in the American city, and its implication for our justice system and our society as a whole. In his interview with the ABA, Desmond discusses his focus on eviction, how it is fundamentally a legal process, what prepared him to write the book, and why he thinks eviction is truly the key to understanding poverty.
I wanted to write a book about poverty that wasn't just about poor people or poor neighborhoods. I thought poverty was a relationship, and I was looking for a process that would allow me to illuminate that. And I thought eviction does that, brings in tenants and landlords and all sorts of folks from across the city. And I also wanted to understand the link between housing and poverty. I moved into a trailer park on the far south side of Milwaukee, lived there for about 5 months, and then moved into a room in a rooming house in the inner city of Milwaukee and lived there for about 10 months. And from those 2 neighborhoods, followed families getting evicted, followed the landlords doing the evicting. If you get arrested in America, you have a right to an attorney, but you have no such right in civil court. So the vast majority of folks in Milwaukee do not have attorneys, but the vast majority of landlords either have a lot of experience in housing court or do have representation. And under those conditions, a lot of tenants summoned to eviction court don't show up. And so the sound of eviction court in Milwaukee is just a name, a pause, and then 3 stamps signifying default eviction. So what's eviction do to people? Eviction causes loss. People lose not only their homes, but often their stuff, which is piled on the sidewalk or taken by movers. Kids lose their schools, you lose your community. It takes a good amount of time and money to establish a home. An eviction can delete all that. An eviction comes with a mark, which is also a legal process. And that mark or that blemish can prevent you from moving into good housing in a safe neighborhood, because many landlords turn away folks with an eviction on their name. I think we have to conclude that eviction is not just a condition of poverty, it's a cause of it. With this book, we have been able to see a really tangible impact. For example, New York City just passed the first ever right to counsel and housing court. I testified in favor of that change based on the evidence that we've amassed about the consequences of evictions fallout on families and children. I think the book opened up a new avenue with a very simple claim that it makes, that without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. And housing and eviction are central to understanding inequality in America today.
Accepting the silver gavel is Matthew Desmond, the author.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for showing out tonight. I want to thank whoever edited that. That was incredible. You podcast people need to hire that editor. I'd like to thank the ABA for this honor. And I'd also just like to thank the lawyers in the room whose firms are dedicated to representing the most vulnerable and poorest among us. We've reached a point today where the majority of poor renting families are spending most of their income on housing costs. The incomes of families of modest means have been flat, they've fallen, their housing costs have soared, and housing policy hasn't filled the gap. Only about 1 in 4 families who qualify for housing assistance today get it. So most poor families are spending most of what they have on housing costs. 1 in 4 of those families are spending 70% of their income just on rent and utilities. And we've moved from a place in America where evictions used to be rare and scandalous and draw crowds to a place where evictions are incredibly commonplace and are overturning the lives of low-income families and their low-income schools and those communities. The good news is there are solutions that work, and one solution is having a lawyer by your side. The sad news is the legal aid only serves about 1 in 10 of the needs. So the more that the ABA can do, the more the lawyers in this room can do to represent families who are at risk of homelessness, to devote a little time upstream to stem the consequences of eviction downstream that we currently incur, I think is a wise public investment. Thank you for everything you all do to represent folks in the courts, and thank you so much for this honor.
Matthew, Evicted is probably one of the most moving books I've ever read. Thank you. Howard, is it possible to move this so that Linda and I can watch the video? If not, that's okay. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Thank you. Okay. The 2017 Silver Gavel Award for Documentaries goes to Do Not Resist Vanished Films. Do Not Resist is a riveting and disturbing documentary account of the lures and risk of militarized policing. It seeks to probe the present as well as the future of domestic law enforcement in the post-9/11 era of the war on terrorism, whether war is waged not just on foreign soil, but here at home. The documentary examines the increasing deployment of military equipment for the purposes of policing our neighborhoods. To tell their story, the filmmakers obtained remarkable access. Framing this story are striking street scenes of Ferguson, Missouri, following the death of Michael Brown. Do Not Resist juxtaposes these disturbing nighttime images of tear gas-shrouded protests in Ferguson and bright daylight scenes of assault vehicles rolling down quiet, small-town streets. This creates an unbelievable, powerful effect. The documentary touches on fundamental matters of law and order, privacy and public safety, and race and class. It challenges us to stop and to consider the consequences of militarized policing. Do Not Resist serves to remind us how a society polices itself always reflects what it values and what it fears. We begin by screening the documentary's trailer. Then filmmaker Craig Atkinson explains what prompted him to make Do Not Resist and what he hopes viewers take away from watching the documentary.
We are seeing a growing debate about so-called warrior cops, a term that I've heard, and the militarization of police. I think it's very important to remind our fellow citizens that we need a range of weapons and equipment to respond and protect our fellow citizens and protect ourselves. Threat! Threat!
We are at war, and you're the frontline troops in this war.
We are preparing for any type of situation. Of course, anything dealing with ISIS is a concern. We do a lot of training in the event that we had a situation like what they had in Missouri.
Disperse immediately. You have the right to a self-defense. You are violating the state laws of curfew. We have the right. That is our right. You are violating the state laws of curfew.
There's actually written descriptions for how the equipment should be used, and it says it's specifically not supposed to be used for riot suppression.
I know you for a long time, bro. A long time.
And y'all still killing us.
25 years I've been here.
Us.
25 years here, I never killed a man.
So get your man.
Folks, there ain't nobody in Mexico right now complaining about militarization of police. You understand? In the very near future, you will be vindicated.
It's clear.
There's gotta be some drugs here.
We need to put the brakes on the fear, and we need to act rationally. Terrorism works because it makes people irrational, and it makes them destroy themselves.
My interest in creating a film on the militarization of police stemmed from the fact that my father was a police officer for 29 years, and he was actually a SWAT officer for 13 of those years. I was sitting in my apartment in Brooklyn right after the Boston Marathon bombing and saw the police response and realizing that it was far different than my father's era of SWAT. I was interested to know what had changed, and that's what prompted the film. When we look at the militarization of police, we're really talking about the flow of equipment and cash grants to domestic law enforcement. Not only is it the tools, but also the mentality of a military officer and how they may conduct themselves
in a war zone has also started to trickle down. It was really important for us to put the camera in situations where we could let scenes unfold for themselves. Instead of a film where it's more expert testimony and talking heads, this is an opportunity for viewers to directly experience many of the headlines that we've seen since Ferguson. We really wanted to point viewers to what was coming down the line in policing. We started to film with technology providers who were returning back from Iraq and Afghanistan with incredible surveillance technology and approaching local law enforcement and selling it to them for very minimal cost. Previously, we fought wars with military hardware, and now we're fighting with surveillance technology, and that's what we're seeing trickle back home to our local law enforcement as well. Do Not Resist was truly an effort on the ground with Laura Hartrick. I shot while Laura produced. We directed it together, and we also edited the film together. Do Not Resist explores the present and the future of American law enforcement, from Ferguson, Missouri, to the militarization of police, to the impact of new technology changing the way that local police departments interact with their communities.
Accepting the Silver Gavel are Craig Atkinson, director, cinematographer, and co-editor, and Laura Hartrick, producer and co-editor.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be up here with so many brilliant minds and to hear of the legacy of films and works that the ABA has honored in the past. I just think when Laura and I first started this project, it was actually a year prior to the events in Ferguson. And after the events in Ferguson actually took place, we thought for sure the news cycle would have changed. And by the time we actually were able to finish the film a year later, no one was going to care about the film. No one would give it the time of day. Not so much about we cared about the film, but it was more for the topic that was getting out. Sadly enough, here we are, and the film is more just as relevant, if not more, than the day we started. Very unfortunately so. But it's an honor to be in here. These types of awards really give films like this legs and additional exposure to people that really need to see it. One call to action that I might say if I'm in front of a room of lawyers is this whole mechanism where technology companies are approaching law enforcement and getting them to sign non-disclosure agreements to use their surveillance technology or other tools that are very, very powerful. Many of the tools can be used for great purpose to help us in our efforts against terrorism, but I still do believe that the citizens have a right to know, how the tools that are being implemented to, in hopes of protecting them, but surely the citizens should have the power to know these tools because, as we said, it greatly affects the way that police interact with their communities, and it takes us out of this model of a community policing system that we all kind of strive and hope for. So again, I thank you truly for this opportunity and the access to the network of the ABA in order to give the film into the hands of the people that can actually do something about it. So I really do thank you enough, and we have a bunch of people that we need to thank.
Thanks to the ABA. It's an incredible honor to be here. I also wanted to thank those that supported the film even before police militarization became a national conversation. So David Menschel and the Vital Projects Fund, Maggie Lear and the Francis Lear Foundation, and the Ford Foundation Just Films. And then it's really important to also thank those partners that came on board to help support the film and bring it out to a wider audience, including Annie Rooney and Rocco Films, PBS POV, Amazon Prime, CineReach, the Fledgling Fund, the Filmmakers Fund, and Picture Motion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The 2017 Silver Gavel Award for Radio goes to Radiolab presents More Perfect WNYC Studios. Accessible and charming, More Perfect cuts through educational and cultural divides. It informs listeners about the United States Supreme Court. how it came to be, and why its decisions so deeply affect our lives. In one highly creative episode, the series relates the dramatic story behind Marbury versus Madison, the 1803 ruling firmly establishing the court's power of judicial review to strike down laws as unconstitutional. While apparently limiting its own authority, the ruling managed to catapult the court into the powerful institution that it is today. How did it do this? In another episode, the series producers explore a reasonably dry 1962 case about legislative apportionment, Baker versus Carr. The case turned out to be so gut-wrenching to decide, and yet apparent to American democracy itself, that it tragically led one Supreme Court justice to a nervous breakdown. More Perfect incorporates creative use of music and other sound effects, archival audio from historic Supreme Court opinions, and lively and engaging interactions with plaintiffs, activists, and commentators to bring the Supreme Court to life. It represents storytelling at its best, informative, entertaining, and relevant. Let's first listen to a clip from that episode on Marbury. It highlights Chief Justice John Marshall's struggle with his cousin, President Thomas Jefferson, and compares his move to that of a Star Wars Jedi Master. In their interview with the ABA, co-executive producer Susie Lechtenberg and legal editor Ellie Mistal then discuss how and why More Perfect was created and what sets it apart.
But he basically tells Marbury, the plaintiff,
you came in and you came to the Supreme Court first. And you did that because Congress passed a law that said that you could come to the Supreme Court first. But the Constitution says that you can't come to the Supreme Court first.
So I can't help you.
Nope.
It's not your fault, Mr. Marbury.
But that law was unconstitutional.
And we're not going to follow that unconstitutional directive.
So you see what he did there?
Maybe I see. I don't know if I see.
Well, okay, so you know that part in Star Wars?
I was a weak old man.
The first one, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is fighting with Darth Vader, and he says,
"If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine."
This is like that, but real. Marshall is agreeing to lose. He's found this way to lose. To let Darth Vader strike him down. And that's actually going to make him more powerful. He's basically saying to his cousin, okay, you don't have to give Marbury his commission. And the reason you don't have to give Marbury his commission is because that law doesn't work. Because we, the court, we get to decide when something agrees with or doesn't agree with the Constitution. So, congrats. You win, cousin.
Oh, and by the way, we, the court, have the power to declare things unconstitutional.
That was the sort of Jedi master move.
That's the move.
Instead of jumping off the cliff or laying down, he jukes to the right, and he establishes a new rule of the game.
Unconstitutional.
Inside this one highly technical, highly political drama between these two cousins, John Marshall sneaks in an atomic bomb. This incredible power. And in Marshall's decision, he wrote,
"It's emphatically the duty and province of the Judicial Department to say what the law is."
Say what the law is.
To say what the law is.
And with those words, he made the court what it is today.
More Perfect came from Jad Abumrad, the host of More Perfect, but also the host of Radiolab. In 2013, he had the idea of having the Radiolab staff take a look at the Supreme Court docket to see if they could find any interesting stories. One of the producers came across a case with an intriguing name, Adoptive Couple v. Baby Girl. It ended up being an award-winning episode. Jad was totally inspired, and he decided to start a whole new show that was completely dedicated to telling stories around the Supreme Court, and that begets More Perfect.
even though More Perfect is not focused on the current docket, it's certainly inspired by the current docket. When you're talking about a current hot-button Supreme Court case, maybe for the public that case is self-contained, but any lawyer knows that case has a history, has a jurisprudential history, has a precedential history, has a procedural history that goes far and far back. You start looking at the underlying rule, and that really becomes your window into the past and your window into these great stories of how we got to where we are.
I think storytelling is really what sets More Perfect apart from other Supreme Court journalism. We have the luxury of going deep and really doing long-form sort of storytelling. A perfect example of that is the episode about Baker versus Carr, the redistricting case from 1962. Justice Charles Whitaker had a nervous breakdown and had to leave the court. You realize that you can explain to people how redistricting and gerrymandering work, but entirely through the lens of a really personal story. More Perfect is stories about race, class, gender, sex, money, politics, kind of all the stuff that we as Americans fight about, but it happens to take place in the arena of the Supreme Court.
More Perfect is about the branch of government you don't get to vote on, so you should pay attention.
Accepting the Silver Gavel is Ellie Mistal, legal editor.
Thank you, guys. After the other awards, I feel like I'm the comic relief a little bit, right? Scalia says the darndest things. I want to thank everybody at WNYC. Because we're public radio, I especially want to thank some of our donors, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Charles Evan Hughes Memorial Foundation, and the Joyce Foundation for their leadership and work in funding us. That segues really nicely to how I want to thank everybody who supports public radio in your own town, in your own state, and certainly at the national level right now. It's super important just at the moment. I actually come from a for-profit background, and let me tell you, being able to work with people who don't have to check their taboola ratings and make sure that things are fire hot on Instagram every second and every day, it's really important. So thank you so much for supporting public radio. And the last thank you I want to do is for the lawyers. Lawyers are the first responders in this day and age. The third branch of government, arguably, is the only branch of government left functioning in this day and age. And so I want to thank every lawyer in the room for everything that you do. It has been an honor for me to just try to explain how the court, how the law works for people, because as I said, I think it's one of the only things left working. So thank you all very much.
The 2017 Silver Gavel Award for Television goes to Trapped, Trilogy Films. Trapped is truly a moving and informative account of the effect of trap laws, targeted regulation of abortion providers, which single out reproductive health clinics for health and safety regulation. The film focuses on the impact of these laws on abortion clinics in Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi. In one suspenseful scene, viewers follow clinic workers in real time as they track the progress of their petition to the United States Supreme Court to request a stay to stop the trap law in Texas from taking effect. The film follows the challenge in the Texas law, to the Texas law, which would come before the Supreme Court in 2016. In Whole Woman's Health versus Helderstedt, the court ruled that the Texas law unconstitutionally burdened the right of women to obtain abortions without providing any valid health or medical justifications. Trapped gives abortion clinic workers voices to articulate why they do what they do, in spite of the obstacles. It is a story that deeply implicates law, whether the regulatory authority of states in a federalist system or the judicial authority of the federal courts to determine the constitutional parameters of reproductive rights. After we view the film's trailer, we will then hear from the filmmaker, Dawn Porter. She explains what prompted her to make Trapped, why she is attracted to legal stories, and what public impact she hopes the film has.
In Texas today, Governor Rick Perry signed some of the nation's toughest.
Mississippi could soon begin the fight to eliminate abortion.
Women are going to have abortions. It's just that they are not going to be safe and legal.
The legislature passed a bill that they knew that we could not comply with. And that was the function of the bill. The function is a trap.
In the past 3 years, there have been hundreds of restrictions passed, more than in the past decade.
These rules don't add anything to the safety of women.
This is our pharmacy. The drugs always expire because we never use them. I don't know that we've ever used any of these things in this clinic ever.
They chop away piecemeal at reproductive rights.
There's a 2 or 3 week waiting list for a procedure where time is of the essence.
I remember getting a call once from a patient. She said, "What if I tell you what I have in my kitchen cabinet and you tell me what I could do?"
We've forgotten what this country is about. Dignity is given of God.
I have a hard time forgiving myself.
I want women to talk to each other, to quit shaming each other. I want people to quit shaming women over abortion, period.
I'm on the floor today to give voice to thousands of Texans who have been ignored.
The Supreme Court is going to hear another one of these cases, and it's going to be a showdown.
They're letting politics trump medicine.
You should understand it's not going to happen without a fight.
It is escalating what is happening across the United States.
It's increasingly becoming the case that women's constitutional rights are determined by their zip codes.
I just want more people to start asking who's benefiting. Who benefits?
I started working on Trapped almost by accident. I was filming for a project in Jackson, Mississippi for a different movie. I read in the local newspaper, the Jackson Clarion Ledger, that there was only one abortion clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. And I was really shocked by that. I just called up the clinic and said, I'm a documentary filmmaker and I just heard about this and I wonder if you would mind if we came over this afternoon. When I went there that first day, I met Dr. Parker. So Dr. Parker is the lead character in Trapped. He is an abortion provider. And he just started talking to me about the state of providing abortion, particularly in the South. And he was such a charismatic and interesting person. And when you're a documentary filmmaker, your curiosity is really where things start. I asked if he would be interested in being filmed, and he agreed. And then 3 years later, here we are. I'm a lawyer. I'm attracted to legal stories. While abortion is legal, the greatest threat to reproductive justice is actually a legal battle that's happening in states across America. It doesn't matter if you have the decision in Roe v. Wade being upheld if there aren't any actual clinics. It's what lawyers call, right without a remedy. I've been absolutely thrilled by the response to Trapped. I'm not looking to change anyone's mind. I think abortion is one of those issues where you're entitled to your own beliefs. But what I am interested in is the legal and political issues surrounding abortion. You are entitled to your beliefs, but that doesn't mean your beliefs trump my legal rights. We saw the themes of Trapped be absorbed into popular culture. John Oliver's Last Week Tonight did a whole segment on trap laws where we consulted with them, made the film available, made research available. The film is getting out there and people are using it and talking about it.
and debating it. And that's exactly what you want to see as a filmmaker.
Accepting the gavel for Trapped is truly an American hero. Dr. Willie Parker.
Well, Dawn's sister Debbie is actually recording this for Dawn, who couldn't be here, who wanted to be here. So she's going to be really very proud at that standing ovation, because this is one of her favorite people, if not her favorite person in the whole wide world. They are really, truly partners. I'm Donna, and I'm Dawn's mother. And while Dawn, I'm so sorry that she couldn't be here, but actually I'm not that sorry, because this gives me a chance to stand in the shadow of her success. So, and moms don't always get to do this. There's not much I can tell you about the movie Trap, because you just saw it all and you heard it in Dawn's world. But I am standing here not only to say thank you for Dawn. She considers this an enormous honor, and it's an especially special honor because this is her second Civil Gavel Award. She won an award in 2014 for Gideon's Army. So I want to reintroduce Dr. Willie Parker, who really encouraged and worked with Dawn to bring this story to life. No issue in America is more toxic than abortion. It's partly because it's really closely associated with religion. Some people think that it's a matter of choice, but then some Christians think that it's murder. Then there is Dr. Parker. People like Dr. Parker. He is driven by his Christian faith to provide abortions in the South, where women seeking to terminate pregnancy have very few options. It's my honor to introduce, on behalf of Dawn, Dr. Willie Parker.
Thank you, Mom. Some people, usually parents adopt children, but this is a reverse adoption. I adopted Dawn's mother the first day I met her. Let me say it's an honor to be here, and I defy the supposed natural animosity between doctors and lawyers. Mr. Eds, you know, you're a fellow Southerner, and down south we say, when you stay in your lane, there's no traffic. And so I take that to mean that I know my way around a procedure room, and you know your way around a courtroom. I don't want you doing procedures, and you don't want me writing briefs. But as was said, because of the legal aspects of how women are being compromised in their dignity and their health and well-being, the very fertile partnership of people who understand the law and who have a commitment to making sure that, you know, somebody once said that Cecile Richards' mother, Governor Ann Richards, someone said to her, you know, life isn't fair. She said, I know, but the law should be. And so with regard to not allowing women to be tyrannized simply because they are born female, I'm grateful that Dawn allowed her curiosity about what she didn't know that day when she stopped by the clinic and I was seeing patients, that it moved her that if she considered herself very smart and erudite, which she is, that if she didn't know about the fact that women's basic human rights around bodily integrity and self-determination were being compromised, she could only imagine what other people didn't know. Down south, we also say to know is to become responsible. So Dawn used her power as a storyteller to bring to light the tyranny of regulatory abuse, to compromise the health and dignity of women, to make us all aware. And so now the question is, now that we know enough, the biting question is, are we good enough? I like to think that the start of us being good enough as a society, because we're a society of laws and regulations, is that we have a room full of people who know the law and who are willing to use the law on behalf of good. So I'm elated to, along with Dawn's family, accept this award for Trapped by her peers, and that it will raise the consciousness so that your task of helping people to understand what the law is for and what it should do won't be as hard. Thank you very much.
Wow, just incredible. These awards are just so moving. So let's just one more round of applause for all of our award winners tonight. Steve, I don't know how your committee figured out how to pick these incredible winners, but thank you so much for all you've done in putting this all together. I want to thank the members of the Standing Committee on Gavel Awards and its Screening Committee for their incredible dedication in judging these entries. A number of the committee members are here this evening. I'd like you to stand and please join me in thanking them for all their hard work. I'm going to go a little off script as I introduce our featured speaker, Brooke Gladstone. You don't know this, but one of the privileges of being president of the American Bar Association is you get to pick the Law Day theme for the Public Education Division, and you also get to pick the speaker at this meeting. And what you don't know is that my husband Michael and I are kind of Brooke Gladstone groupies. We listen to On the Media at WABE in Atlanta, and it's on Sunday afternoons. And so after we listen to Meet the Press and all of that other depressing stuff, we get to hear what you have to say. So for those of you who don't know Brooke as well as I do, she's the managing editor and co-host of the long-running public radio series On the Media, syndicated through WNYC in New York to more than 400 stations nationwide. And so when I'm traveling, which as ABA president, you travel a lot, I still get to hear you. So each week it spends an hour investigating how the media shapes our worldview. Brooke is also the author of 2 books, including the just published The Trouble with Reality, a rumination on moral panic in our time. The New Yorker has called her book a battle plan for individuals anxiously watching the edifice of reality collapse. That's encouraging. In 2011, she also authored The Influencing Machine, and The Atlantic listed it as among the top 10 masterpieces of graphic nonfiction. Brooke has also written for the London Observer, the Boston Globe, Washington Post, and the American Journalism Review. She started her career in print media and then transitioned to public radio. In 1987, Brooke joined NPR as a senior editor of Weekend Edition with Scott Simon, another favorite of mine, and became senior editor of All Things Considered in 1989, another favorite of mine. A Knight Fellow at Stanford University studying Russian language and history. She was also NPR's Moscow-based reporter during the presidency of Boris Yeltsin. Afterward, she was NPR's first media correspondent. Brooke is the recipient of 2 Peabody Awards, a National Press Club Award, an Overseas Press Club Award, and a trio of Gracies. And I should add, a Silver Gavel. The Bench Press, an episode of On the Media, received last year's Silver Gavel Award for radio. Bench Press was an entire episode devoted to demystifying the U.S. Supreme Court and explaining how journalists cover it. So please join me in welcoming Brooke Gladstone.
I'm sure you want another speaker right now after everything you've heard and how moved you've been. But I just want to say, 60 years ago, when the ABA launched the Silver Gavel Awards for Media and the Arts, it made perfect sense. Freedom of speech and the rule of law being the twin pillars of democracy, and America was synonymous with democracy. Democracy ensured our freedom. What could go wrong? We are, after all, a great nation, an idealistic nation, put it another way, a delusional nation. In 1644, England was among the greatest of nations, and that year was when John Milton penned his screed against censorship, known as the Areopagitica, and he was yelling at the Parliament, and he said, "Lords and Commons, consider what nation it is whereof you are, a nation not slow and dull, but of a quick, ingenious, and piercing spirit, subtle and sinewy to discourse, not beneath the reach of any point the highest that human capacity can soar to. Let truth and falsehood grapple. In a free and open encounter, truth will win." Now, the reason why I mention Milton is because he inspired Thomas Jefferson, who later said, "Truth is great and will prevail if left to herself. She is the proper and sufficient antagonist to error and has nothing to fear from conflict." Oh, come on. The laws of human nature do not provide for the triumph of reason. And yet, these founding fathers were so convinced that wisdom and information would protect us from all of the illnesses that the flesh is heir to, that they created the First Amendment. And the First Amendment was to ensure that wisdom would always inform us, ensure that our press and speech would forever be free, because then and only then could we hold our leaders accountable to our shared ideas, our goals, and to the facts. Now, a lot of people ask me to comment on the president's attacks on the press. I think this is one room where I don't have to explain that this isn't an attack on the media, but on the very nature of truth. Accountability, he says, is bunkum. He tells his supporters that the entire institution of the free press is a special interest. Now, the sheer abundance of the president's lies demonstrates again and again that facts are disposable. They're confusing devices that do not serve us, that do not matter. By degrading the very notion of shared reality, Trump is trying to disable the engine of democracy. Because consensus is the bedrock of democracy, right? Consensus can only be reached if there are certain shared principles, maybe goals, but certainly a common pool of facts. But when truth is little more than an arbitrary personal decision, there's no common ground to be reached, and there's no incentive to look for it. It just becomes a kind of order of the jungle struggle. And that is probably the moral panic that people feel right now, the kind of fear that goes far beyond merely politics or even the election of a president that we may think may not be good for the country. Let's talk about the big winners. Evicted. It's about the poor and it's about social justice. Do not resist. It's about criminal justice. More perfect. It's about the codification of justice. Trapped. It's the defense of justice. I was talking to a woman for a piece we're running this week, a great sociologist at Penn, and she said that she hates the phrase pro-choice because it makes it sound like it's a personal choice, and the most important thing is to safeguard the choice. But we see what happens when we take away the opportunity while superficially preserving choice. She wants to use the phrase reproductive justice. And I think it's like all these other justices, how we need to start reframing. That's what my show does, how we have to start reframing these issues. What is justice? I looked it up. It's fairness, moral rightness, a scheme or system of law in which every person receives his or her due from the system, including all rights, natural or legal. Now, democracy. When I said that we were naive to think that facts on their own would do the trick, I think we have to extend that same naivete, if we still have it, to democracy. Here's a quote about democracy. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes itself and exhausts and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. It is in vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than aristocracy or monarchy. Those passions are the same in all men and under all simple forms of government, and when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty. Individuals have conquered themselves, nations and large bodies of men, never. That was John Adams in 1814. Listen to the angry man. He says that democracy is merely a template, a structure as prone to human frailty as any other. Yet, it remains our commitment. Individuals may conquer themselves. Individuals may also surpass themselves. Either way, we have subscribed to a nation that adheres to that democratic code. It is in the dust, our obligation as citizens to repair and improve the nation in which we live. You know, a couple of weeks ago, no, it was probably a couple of months ago, a friend of ours, my husband is a journalist, I'm a journalist, a friend of mine who's a journalist, emailed and said, do you kind of feel like you've been practicing for this moment for 25 years? You know, I stand with Ellie. Right now, the law and the shattered or tattered hulk that is the good media have a job to do. And it's really hard, and it's kind of expensive. And if we don't do it, we're going to have such a big mess to clean up later. We will anyway, but we need to protect people when they are so vulnerable right now. We need to ring the alarm, and we need to bring lawsuits before the Koch brothers elect all the local judges and magistrates and all this. It's very easy to buy a judge election in a small place. It takes hardly any money. And the real work, the good work, obviously the only work, for good or ill, is being done on the local level. So that's pretty crucial. Anyway, I just want to say that I was so pleased to be asked here because I have never felt closer to the law than I do right now. I feel that we are marching in close formation, even though we may continually disagree. I mean, the fact is that a lot of people hate lawyers because they think all lawyers are the worst lawyers. A lot of people hate media for precisely the same reason. We are herding cats, we are an unruly mob, but I feel sometimes that ours may be the only two institutions that can provide any bulwark against the threats to our democracy. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. That thoughtful, engaging. Maybe we won't sleep tonight, but your remarks on the essential role of the news media in American democracy, something, yes, very close to lawyers. So we thank you all for attending this presentation. If you know of someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, please share the ABA web address, which is in your program booklet, as the edited video of this program is going to be there for all of you to view. I wish you, hopefully we'll all sleep tonight, but I wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you so very much for being here.